Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Brian Daly. I'm the chair of the Special Events Committee of the Hyman G. Rickover Commissioning Committee, SSN 795. It is my privilege to sit in this morning for my colleague, Christopher Roebling, who many of you know as the public face of the Commissioning Committee's programs. Chris was called away yesterday by a family emergency and asked that I extend his apologies to each of you, to Admiral Haney, and to his colleagues on the committee. Chris will be back in this chair for our May program. And so it is my honor on behalf of the Commissioning Committee to welcome each of you to today's program, Operational Readiness, Maintaining the Fleet for Great Power Competition with Admiral Cecil Haney. This program is being recorded and will be available later through our website at ussrickover.org. Today's program will have 5 components. It will begin with a construction status update on the boat. We're very grateful that Admiral Haney has generously offered to personally provide that update. He has been in contact with the leaders of the program, including Captain Christopher Hansen, who himself addressed the committee last year. We also will then have Admiral Haney proceed with his keynote presentation on operational readiness. That will then be followed by the 3rd stage of the program for which you are responsible, and that is the audience Q&A. We know that Admiral Haney's thought-provoking presentation is going to spur many good questions. And so we ask that you submit them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. My colleague and friend, Jeff Gray, will be grouping the questions together by subject so we can move through as many of them as possible, as efficiently as possible during today's webinar. Then, after Admiral Haney leaves us, I'll be introducing Steve Schlegel, my colleague who is the chair of the sponsorship committee, who'll have information on how each of you can help the commissioning committee complete its mission on behalf of the USS Hyman G. Rickover. And then finally, we'll close with an announcement about our May program and a very special speaker who will be joining us then. And so now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the commander of U.S. Strategic Command and the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, retired 4-star Admiral Cecil D. Haney. Admiral Haney.
Thank you, Brian, for the kind introduction. And I just want to thank the entire committee for commissioning committee for all you are doing in regards to this newest submarine, Rickover, which I'll talk a bit about here in my formal remarks. But first, let me give you a status update that I have associated with the Rickover SSN 795. It's in its 66th month of a scheduled 70-month construction period. And the commander anticipates that it'll take 77 months in this construction with an expected delivery in the first quarter of calendar year 2022. The ship has reached the milestone of pressure hull complete back in September, on the 8th of September in 2020. And they're working through propulsion plant testing in order to support the rolling out of the construction hull this summer and to get waterborne. That's a big deal, getting through that propulsion plant testing. I can remember it so well in some of my other activities. So my hat's off to the crew because I know they're working hard through that period. Christening is scheduled for 31 July in order to support an outdoor event with the ship in the water. And I'm also pleased to report and to hear that they have achieved full manning, and that too is a big deal. They have approximately 20% of their crew temporarily assigned to support other operational submarines. in order to gain their at-sea experience. And they have also been recognized for the second consecutive year for the Retention Excellence Award. And to me, that's a big deal because retaining our sailors is so important in order to sustain the Navy, and particularly to get at what I'll talk about a little later, great power competition. The Rickover sailors have been working hard. And it was also neat to hear that the commanding officer has selected 3 for Meritorious Advancement due to their stellar work and experiences. First, I'll mention here Machinist Mate Auxiliary Fireman John Holland. He was advanced to 3rd class petty officer for his tireless work while temporarily assigned aboard the USS North Dakota. While on assignment with the North Dakota, Holland gained invaluable experience operating the ship's non-nuclear mechanical systems responsible for maneuvering the ship and numerous watchstanding responsibilities. So we congratulate Machinist Mate 3rd class now, John Holland. Second, we have Sonar Technician Submarines 3rd class, Marcos Castro, who was advanced to 2nd class petty officer. Now, Castro volunteered to deploy aboard the USS Indiana in support of the ship's deployment that was vital to national security. During this tour, Castro quickly qualified for advanced watch stations. He made such an impression on the leadership of the USS Indiana that he was requested to return and assist them again with their ship's tactical certification. So hats off to congratulate Sonar Technician, 2nd class now, Marcos Castro. And finally, Machinist Mate Nuclear 2nd class, Tyler Lavrink was advanced to 1st class petty officer. Now Lavrink played a crucial role in the engineering department's success throughout propulsion plant testing. As the machinery division's training petty officer, he implemented an aggressive training plan that ensured his peers were ready to perform once-in-a-lifetime testing and that they had the knowledge to qualify at-sea watch stations. As an engineering department section leader since establishing shipboard watchstanding, he also led a 15-person section through multiple shift work test programs. Lavrink also implemented a plan for a Tiger team to complete a test program, resulting in the entire engineering department from having to enter shift work and saving over 3,000 man hours. So well done there to now Machinist Mate 1st class, Tyler Lavrink. So how about a virtual round of applause for these stellar shipmates here that have done so well to be recognized. That's a big deal to be meritoriously advanced. And I'm sure the competition was steep, just knowing the caliber of sailors that are on Rickover SSN 795. So that's my update to you associated with the ship. And I hope you sense as well as I do that they are on the trajectory there in order to get christened and then soon after that to get commissioned and become part of our operational forces. Now, let me get started here in the topic here that I'm going to talk about here, operational readiness, maintaining the fleet for great power competition. You know, it's neat for me to be a part of this discussion series that you have here because I have a couple things in common with the crew of Rickover SSN 795. First and foremost, I had the pleasure of serving as the engineer aboard the USS Rickover SSN 709. I noticed there's a significant number difference between 709 and 795, and that's a good thing. I was also part of a new construction crew as XO in the mighty USS Asheville. So I have fond memories of being part of that new construction team and its certification process. which the crew of 795 is going through today as they ready the ship, along with the great work that's being done by the Shipyard crew there at Electric Boat. Now, I also had the pleasure and fond memories of supporting new construction certification when I was commander of Submarine Group 2 some moons ago. But it was a great experience, and particularly getting out on those first initial sea trials and seeing the magic that occurs here in the combination between the shipyard workforce and the crew. And really excited about continuing to follow the USS Hyman G. Rickover SSN 795 story. And I just can't thank the commissioning committee and team enough for what you're doing in support of this new Rickover submarine. So today, I have the great pleasure of talking about one of my favorite subjects. And I'll test, I think it's very, very important here as we address great power competition now and into the future. This subject of operational readiness is key to our success. The readiness of our joint military forces in addressing the challenges of both China and Russia today and into the future cannot be overstated. As we look at the strategic documents the previous administration put out and the one that the Biden administration has put out, it specifically acknowledges that we face strategic challenges from an increasingly assertive China and a destabilizing Russia. So with that, you can anticipate the demands that are on our fleet today and what they will be tomorrow as we continue to grow the fleet in size. As we look at these discussions of growing from like 297 ships to 355. Now, when we look though at what's going on in our Navy today, I am awestruck, as I have recently read here, about the return of the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, CVN 68. It's now at home here in March, came back in mid-March. Here after 341 days of being away from their families. That included, of course, their quarantine period and training and a deployment to the Middle East and to the Pacific. 11 months. I'm always awestruck by that. One, in terms of the ingenuity of our industrial base to produce something that can sustain itself that many months at sea in multiple theaters. And I'm also in awe of the resiliency of the crew to be able to sustain operations for such a lengthy period of time, knowing that in addition to the operational success we frequently talk about, that there were a lot of maintenance going on in order to keep Nimitz at sea for that length of period of time. So if we grow the fleet, we know that growing it by itself doesn't guarantee current and future operational success in this security environment. An essential component of the Navy's formula for success will be the emphasis it places on establishing higher capabilities and capacities for maintaining its sophisticated platforms. Our recent history has shown some disturbing trends in this area that I thought I would highlight. I'm going to give you a quote here from a GAO report, number 2166, that states, quote, "The Navy's effort to restore its readiness are premised on the adherence to set deployment, training, and maintenance schedules. However, from fiscal year 2014 to the end of fiscal year 2020, the Navy has incurred over 38,600 days of maintenance delays." Now, that's a lot of time in terms of these delays. Now, obviously spread over a variety of different platforms and spread over some years. But that is something clearly that the Navy has to get at in a coherent way. And I'll give you some examples of some good news in terms of progress being made today, but we still have some major distractors, if you will, that we have to get at. Now, in this GAO report, it lists a number of factors associated with them in 3 different categories: acquisition, operations, and maintenance. And I'm going to read through that laundry list just to give you an appreciation to what's being worked on, because I think that's important to set the stage here for this conversation. Under acquisition, ineffective requirements for ship reliability and maintainability. Ineffective acquisition oversight of issues impacting sustainment. Optimistic sustainment assumptions not evaluated. And providing ships to the fleet with defects due to gaps in the Navy's delivery policies. And insufficient technical data. Under operations, it lists ships' low crew levels and performance. Also, deferred maintenance. And then the last one, which I've already articulated on here, is extended deployments. Under maintenance, it lists workforce capacity, capability, and prioritization, unplanned work, adherence to planning processes, conditions of facilities and equipment, insufficient shipyard capacity, availability of parts and materials, information technology infrastructure, and then the last category being modernizations and alterations. So I think you get the picture here. And I believe it's critically important that in order to get at the expected operational life out of these platforms, the Navy must increase the maintenance capabilities and capacities in 3 areas. First, the basic, intermediate, and advanced technical training that the crews themselves receive. Second, the intermediate maintenance activities available both afloat and ashore. And then third, the industry's capacity and capability in both our public and our private shipyards. America must make the necessary investments in these maintenance capabilities and capacities to support not just peacetime operations, but it would be also prudent to prepare for any potential conflict with Russia and China. Now, maintenance is not one of those sexy or exciting topics of discussion. In fact, even some of the folks that are on active duty that I mentored today, it's interesting in the discussions we have when they say, well, sir, I'm headed for ship Humpty Frats. And the way it looks right now, my entire tour could be in the shipyard. And usually that's a downer for that particular individual. But it's an important area. And I usually try to pump up our sailors in that regard and say, yes, but you're doing God's work in a big way in terms of what you're about to do. And you're going to see some intricate operations involving this coordination and orchestration between a variety of different maintenance activities. Because when you're in the shipyard, you're not usually just worked on by that particular shipyard. There's other identities that also descend upon the ship in order to work on what needs to be done. But if you speak with any crew member of today's submarines and surface ships, they will regale you with stories of heroic actions that sometimes must occur in order to get their boat or ship underway in support of operations at sea as they work through this maze of maintenance professionals associated with our industrial base. So I'm going to talk first about the crew. But as I do so, let me pause here for a bit and just explain to you a little bit about me. You see, I was blessed in the beginning here. My second operational tour was actually in the maintenance world. I served aboard as radiological controls officer on board the USS Frank Cable, AS-40, as a very young lieutenant. Now, this was a most rewarding experience for me. A lot of hard work, a lot of long hours during that period. But from standing repair duty officer, from supervising nuclear maintenance and repairs, quality assurance work, understanding things like welding requirements, understanding cranes, their certification, how they could be used and what have you, and how critical they were to the operations of ships and submarines. That this was, quite frankly, for me, a major learning experience. And quite frankly, I was really thankful to have that under my belt before I became the engineer, which was my next operational tour of USS Hyman G. Rickover 709. That tender just gave me a wealth of experience in the maintenance world of how to get things done, how they operated, and what they needed from us in order to be successful within their operations. Now, unfortunately, we no longer have a large of a tender fleet today that we had back then. And hence, there are no longer assignments for us nuclear trained line officers like the one I had there. It really was a growth spurt in my career, and particularly in understanding the maintenance world. Now, I am not saying that that's the only way to get this experience. But what I will say is that understanding how to maneuver in this maintenance world is critical for crews in the wardroom, in the chief's quarters, and in the ranks of our petty officer technicians. The crew on board all Navy ships and submarines must have a cadre of individuals that understand what is needed to safely and effectively get the maintenance done, both at sea and in port. Now, some come directly from maintenance training, basic, intermediate, advanced. And if coupled with some years of maintenance experience, it truly helps that particular ship, submarine, and they become invaluable players. Then we have to make sure we keep them in, because it's those type of folks that will sustain us during critical operations, many times miles away from home port. This has always been, though, an evolving area in terms of how much do we train our sailors for maintenance, and where are they at critical milestones of decisions of staying in the Navy or getting out, because that valuable maintenance experience obviously gives them credibility and capability on the outside that's sought after. So I believe this is an area that we must continually look at, how we revamp, how we train, and how we provide that necessary hands-on level of experience that these sailors bring to the table. The crew, though, also must be experienced in the art of properly isolating critical systems for the maintenance to be conducted in the first place. We're establishing prerequisite plant and system conditions to do the maintenance, which really requires a remarkable understanding of the critical systems. And finally, they get involved in the development of and approval of critical work packages, and in some cases, quality assurance packages that must be done and improved. And that too is a lot of activity that must be occurring in order to have success in the maintenance world. This involves the ability to pull up credible lessons learned from the last time maintenance or even the system operations was done. And that requires the fleet to maintain quality lessons learned for these crews to quickly and easily get to. And this is an area that I've seen that needed work on throughout my career. And I hope we're in a better place today, given what we have in the IT world to support that much better. So while I've heard of some improvements in certain areas, such as electronic tagout procedures, standardized work packages, and while I may have been removed from a bit of this since I retired, I have no doubt that more improvements can be made in these critical areas to relieve some of the burdens of the crew so that they can have meaningful and easy to get to data and databases. I know this was a bit long-winded in talking about the crew here and their piece of the rock, but the crew is involved regardless if they're doing the maintenance themselves, whether the intermediate maintenance activity is doing or whether the shipyard is doing. And hence, it is a critical aspect of this that can delay maintenance if not done properly, or can accelerate it if done properly. As we look at what happens when a ship like Rickover 795 gets commissioned, then it gets supported by what we call these intermediate maintenance activities that are both ashore and afloat. Now, I mentioned the submarine tender that I was on years ago. It's still afloat out there, ready and able Frank Cable, as I used to call it. It's out there in the Western Pacific today, as well as the land, another submarine tender. But we have also in major home ports for submarines, maintenance activities at the intermediate level that supports the maintenance. And these activities have to be funded properly. They have to be equipped properly with the various capabilities that are required for maintenance, including cranes, including dry docks, in order to get this right. So this is an important area, and it's good to see today that the Navy is focused on this critical area. The CNO himself is involved in focusing the Navy on this, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. And then our final area here of importance is these crown jewels of our public and private shipyards. Perhaps clearly the crew of Rickover 795 is getting an experience in a private shipyard. And some of our other submarines out there are also being worked on by private as well as public shipyards. There's been a history when I talked about the number of delays here associated with the problems that I gave you in that laundry list as we look in particular at public shipyards. But improvements also needed to be made in the private shipyards as well. While our private shipyards, for example, like Electric Boat, are involved in new construction, they have been called upon to support existing fleet maintenance, such as submarine repair. And this is occurring at a time where these shipyards are hiring more people in order to do the new construction work. So this business of building and training their workforce to address these demands, in addition to having the facilities and equipments and capabilities to get this work done, is very, very important. So then you might say, okay, Cecil, you've given us this laundry list. You've given us sort of a state of affairs here in a way. So what are we doing about it? How are we really improving from that list of maintenance delays I gave you earlier associated with this? Well, the good news is there have been a lot of studies associated with this. And it's interesting to me, even here as a retiree, to just look at the dialogue going on between the United States Navy and their strategy and efforts to get at this, as well as the number of reports the GAO, Government Accountability Office, has put out associated with this. And consequently, it's sort of like a very unique dialogue that's continually going on here, which I believe is forcing improvement going forward and at least asking questions, in addition to other stakeholders associated with this. Clearly, the type commanders associated with the submarine force, the leadership of the surface forces, et cetera, are interested in also improving this. But this business of getting the research done to figure out what needs to be done and then to work it is so important. So back in May of 2018, the Navy established what's called the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program Office, commonly called the SIOP here, which is essentially a managed program led by Naval Sea Systems Command, NAVSEA, with support from Naval Facilities Engineering Command and the Commander Naval Installations Command. NAVSEA is, of course, the operating agent and the technical authority for all four shipyards executing the capital equipment program, while the Navy Facilities Engineering Command provides facility engineering and construction programs that also support environmental and compliance requirements, and retains head of contracting activity authority for facilities and dry dock investments. So you can see the Navy has organized themselves around this in order to improve where they need to go. In fact, in this one GAO report, it's also referenced in the NAVSEA website, that the Navy Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program, this SIOP program, this initiative to improve conditions in public shipyards, is initially estimated to cost $21 billion, yes, billion dollars, and take 20 years to implement. Now, interesting, there was a hearing on the Congress, in the Congress here just last Friday, I believe, and there was a lot of challenges by the Congress, and I think the Navy is also challenging themselves as to, okay, well, can we really take 20 years to get there? Or can we get there faster? And if so, what do we need to do that can be done in 5 years, that can be done in 10 years, that can be done in 15 years, vice waiting for 20 years? Because we never know when we may have heightened tensions and conflicts that will require our naval forces to do even more than it's doing today. So getting to this faster is clearly something that needs to be done. So it was good to see the CNO establish what's called a fragmentary order, FRAGO, in the second quarter of 2020 to focus the maintenance community on reductions of late ship availability with a target of 80% reduction in 2020. And to date, I am to understand the Navy has achieved the following. For private contracted surface ship availability, the Navy incurred 7,094 days of maintenance delays in 2019, as compared to 1,075 that occurred during 2020. So we see a dramatic reduction, some 85% in these delays. For public shipyard availabilities, the Navy incurred 1,528 days of maintenance delays in fiscal year 2019, as compared to a projected 147 that has occurred in fiscal year 2020. This represents over a 90% reduction in the delays. And for private shipyard nuclear availabilities, the Navy incurred 620 days of maintenance delays in 2019, as compared to a projected 236 that occurred during 2020. 62% reduction. So in summary, across submarines and surface ships, there is about a 79% reduction in these delays. So that is the good news associated with these areas. Now, that doesn't mean the work is all done. No, there's much more to be done in this area. And I am just pleased to hear the congressional level of discussions associated with this, the CNO driving the issue, and to see these type of improvements statistically ongoing. But I know there's much, much more under the hood here associated with this story. As we look to the future, I would argue, are we doing enough? in terms of utilizing developments with artificial intelligence in order to better anticipate maintenance requirements, as delays in maintenance availabilities are frequently caused by surprises when equipment, or for example, tanks are opened up and we discover much, much more has to be done than planned. Can we not only better equip our maintenance activity with better equipment to facilitate repairs, how can we improve apprenticeship and advanced training to enhance the workforce to be capable more quickly? And I would also say here, even though I know some work is ongoing with this, is we really need to continue to work to improve the quality of our drawings and plans in such a way that they can be effectively and efficiently brought together and utilized in this IT world that we're in. It's nice seeing, in at least the private shipyard that I toured here about a year and a half ago, the use, quite frankly, of things like iPads and what have you to have what technicians needed right at their disposal here, and their ability to pull up extra things in that regard. I mentioned earlier about how we need to continue to make sure we have an efficient and effective lesson learned database that crews can easily pull up, and I think there's more work to be done in that regard. And I also would like to highlight a little bit associated with shipyard security. Clearly, we've had some mishaps in that area in terms of fires that have taken out both a submarine and a surface ship. Wasn't that long ago to Miami. We lost her at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. So this business of how we can avoid these kind of mishaps, and today in this area of great power competition and what have you, it's very important that we're able to also protect our things that we have in the cyber world so that we can keep our advantages in stealth and lethality and what have you in our operating forces. So you might say, well, okay, Cecil Haney, we're the commissioning committee here for 795 workover. What does all this mean to us going forward? Well, you know, one day here in the near future, the ship will christen, as I mentioned here in this ship status report, and then it will get commissioned, and then it will start operations. And when it does, quite frankly, it's been amazing to me throughout my career of seeing what gets done at sea and what needs to be done sometimes very quickly in port, even for a brand new submarine. Now, I know we build our Virginias much better than we build our Los Angeles class submarines today, but I can sure remember being so surprised as we took the USS Asheville from its commissioning, how to shake and bake it and run it through its trials and get certified in various respects and participate in operations and what have you. How many times the crew had to roll up their sleeves to work on X, Y, or Z in order to sustain us out there at sea, brand new submarine. So this business is very important. And I would want you as a commissioning committee to know that the crew is busy, even when in port, conducting maintenance, sending folks to school for advanced maintenance training, etc. The crew is busy also working with other entities, planning for maintenance availabilities for both preventative and corrective maintenance. And sometimes the real headaches occur associated with ship alterations and installations because we're drooling to get some of that new stuff installed. It might be temporarily installed for a test or for an operation or for a deployment, but we got to get it right. And we have to man for both operations and the technical expertise we require of the crew. You will see 795 in its future being worked on by intermediate maintenance activities. And it's not just about, as we look for improvement in these areas, of just adding manpower. It's much more than that. as these maintenance facilities, these regional maintenance centers, as well as our shipyards, both private and public, require foundational improvements in areas in order to operate more efficiently and effectively. I used to feel for a while that the public shipyards in particular were a bit of a forgotten zone. The shout louder campaign on commanders doesn't work. We have to provide them the resources in order to get the job done. Cybersecurity, I can't say enough about, but I'd also add physical security. Very important today as we hear of drones and those kind of things, just other activities that can come from our local shorelines. So in the lifespan of Hyman J. Rickover 795, you can expect a lot of attention in the area of improving and sustaining our Navy's maintenance capabilities. And that's a good thing. I hope we don't let up on the gas pedal as we continue to work in these areas. I think this area is so critical to deterrence. It's critical to peacetime operations, periods of heightened tensions, and of course, if we have to go there in warfighting. We must get this right. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about something near and dear to my heart, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral Haney. We very much appreciate your remarks and insight through 38 years of experience. We've received several questions. The first is, you're called into the Oval Office and you're joined there by Secretary of the Treasury Yellen and Secretary of Defense Austin. And the president tells you they're opening up the printing press. What is it that you need? You'll be given. What four things would you cite as your top priorities for addressing the operational readiness for the fleet?
That's a great question in terms of operational readiness. Now, I've highlighted some things as I talked about here during my discussion here, but I think it's really bigger than that if you're really talking in the Oval Office in terms of readiness as a whole. In some respects, in order to improve in readiness, you have to get rid of some of the old stuff. And that piece I didn't talk about, because sustaining and maintaining things that have been operating so long that the supply chain isn't there, that you're having to reverse engineer in order to get part X, Y, or Z to sustain it, whether it's an airplane, whether it's a surface ship, whether it's a submarine. We must get that right. And hence, one of the things I would say, Mr. President, the importance of our ship and submarine modernization program is very, very important. And I would also want to give them confidence, and hopefully we can, that we have sharpened our pencil and we've really looked at the newer platforms that we're putting out, that we have a sustainment plan, that we have parts and what have you really understood, so that we know when those platforms, these newer ones, go in, that we have a much better opportunity to get it right, so that we can in fact get the platform in, get the maintenance done, and get them back out to sea. So that would probably be the top item on my list, is continue to modernize and to be careful of hanging on too long for those platforms that don't have the capabilities we envision needing, that don't have the technologies that we envision that we must have going forward here in the complex and diverse places we expect these platforms to operate. I would also foot stomp where we are going with this thing that I call the PSYOP program here for our public yards. And I would say, you know, that $21 billion that I discussed there, I don't personally know all the components that are in there, but I would sure hope we can stand on our 2 feet and really justify that that's what we need and why we need it. And here is its prioritized list and how we plan to get at it and what we could accelerate, so that instead of the 20 years, that we can do it in a much shorter fashion. And then I would hopefully also be able to talk about perhaps some specific technologies that we really need to invest on, or pilot programs that we need to, in order to think differently, more innovative about some of these areas. And hopefully I would have some of that already going on if I was in the office with them. Hopefully, Mr. Secretary, Lloyd Austin does. And that those are the kind of things that I think we really need to invest in. And that's assuming already that cybersecurity is already one that's been talked about in terms of things. And the importance of the manning and being able to defend that manning in both the industrial base as well as on the platform. Because when we have to reduce that manning in cycles, in either we see that effect, we see those delays. And then the final thing, since you asked, and this is my last one, is I still find it a bit troubling when we have to keep our platforms out for such a long length of time. And what are the causals and factors for that kind of business when we're not engaged in a major power shooting conflict? So the question is, what kept Nimitz out there 11 months? Why couldn't it have been 8 months? What wasn't available to help in that regard? And how will resources help to fix that problem? Anyway, I hope that's helpful in answering that question.
Very much so. We're asked the question, how does the operational readiness of the U.S. fleet compare to that of our adversaries?
Well, that's a great question. Number one, I'm not sure our adversaries operate at the op tempo that we're operating at right now. So I'd have to be very careful about any kind of comparison. President Xi hasn't given me any great access for me to really understand where the Chinese readiness is in that regard. So I'll talk a little bit about China first, but more esoterically than specific in terms of knowledge. So it's not because I'm going to, not trying to share some intelligence with you. This is all unclassified in this discussion. But I would say, number one, when you look at China, first, they have grown their fleet capability in a remarkable way in a short period of time. So a lot of what they have is new. But as I discussed in our own, looking at our own Navy, even new things still require a lot of love and attention. China watches us like a hawk, and they really look at how the US does things, and particularly how its Navy does things from some of my earlier time frame. Getting to watch that and also go to China when I was a Pacific Fleet commander a few moons ago. But as such, I don't know how well they're investing in it, but I can think in terms of, China has a lot of manpower to throw at it. They have a lot of money to throw at it and what have you. And they have a lot of pride right now in terms of what they have. So I would predict right now they are working that piece. How that will work in the long term, I don't know, because it is something, as we see in the US, that requires a continual effort. And when we stop looking at this, when we stop supporting it, we see we have problems. So no doubt China is watching every GAO report and dissecting it as much as we put out there and in terms of what we say we're doing about it.
How successful, Admiral, has the Navy been in retaining its highly trained sailors?
Well, that's a good question. And I can't say today I have current data on it, other than as I talk from some specific units where I have a couple friends that are in command right now, or XO, and I talk about how well their manning is. And overall, doing pretty good right now. It's going to be interesting, though, in what we've seen historically as periods of our economy changes. And the things that our individuals can go work in so many other places that gives them options. That's when we have critical dips, particularly in the area of E6s and that middle area of petty officer technician, E5s, E6, E7s. And that's an area that we need to be mindful of. One of the things I was thinking about, even when I was working on what I was going to say here today, was if you have sailors that raise their right hand to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, enlist because they want to see the world and they want to get around to various places, but you keep them in shipyard for extended period of time, longer than what was advertised. What is that going to do to retention when our employment improves, when we have relief from the COVID environment? That's the piece that I am really worried about. I should say I'm not going to have any hands on that, but I hope the Navy is thinking hard about, because as I have at least one CO that's in, that wrote me a note and said, "Hey, sir, I'm going to be in Shipyard for my entire command tour." Keeping those individuals motivated because they want to be out doing the missions, doing the operations, visiting places overseas. That piece is so important. When I look at some of the stories of your Helena, Columbus, Boise, I just wonder how they are really managing that if this was a different economic environment for the United States of America. That's the piece where we've seen these valleys in those technicians, electronic technicians in particular, both nuclear, non-nuclear, that can translate their skill sets easily in other areas. Both nuclear and non-nuclear machinist mates, they work hard. Those non-nuclear ones have so much territory to work on throughout the ship. And as a result, they too, their skill sets translate. So it's very important. And that's why the work that this committee does here, in my mind, is so important, not just for the commissioning, but it's what you do post-commissioning. And I'm really proud of Chicago as I've witnessed their work before on other submarines named after the namesake. Thank you.
Admiral Haney, with plans to grow the Navy's fleet by nearly 60 warships, does American industry have the capacity to effectively support the Navy's mission and specifically the Navy's maintenance requirements?
Well, I think first and foremost, from what I sense and see in some regards from my retired perch, is the industrial base in the private sector has the ability to ramp up in order to build and modernize. They also have the ability, and we've already proven in some regards, of the ramping up of manpower in the public shipyards more recently. The piece, though, gets to the essence of your question. You add 60 more to that, or more, as we saw Secretary Esper pushing for higher numbers of ships being built. You have to sustain them. And that piece, you can look at and say, well, can the shipyard do it? Do we have that industrial capacity? But with it also has to become that planning capacity in terms of what we acquire. In the planning for that, how do we really map sustainability into that equation so that we can think about that? I know it can be done. I got my butt kicked a lot when I was director of submarine warfare in terms of bringing brief after brief to talk about the Ohio replacement platform. How is it going to fit in existing dry docks, for example? other questions relating to sustainability. And clearly, in Virginia and in the Columbia class, the business of not having to refuel it through the life of the ship helps somewhat. But we still have to get through a lot of that other maintenance. So I don't have a good crystal ball here in terms of that. There's a lot of articles that are out there of people that are naysaying, but I really think it depends on how our country prioritizes and works that. As I listen to Shipyard, particularly on the private side, as they talk about how they've made ties to some of the schools to have trade kind of training going on in the high schools so that they can in fact work their workforce and develop it going forward. They have innovative and thoughtful ideas in that regard. But what they need is plans that we stick to, because when we say we're going to do this and they start hiring for that, and then we don't, then that causes them to have to reduce that. And then, you're on this cycle of curves. And when you really want a sustained and capable workforce that's not going up and down, that you keep the confidence and trust of that workforce, but you also train them and can continually use them going forward. So it's very complex. I'm not optimistic. I think we have a lot of work to do in that regard, but I'm not pessimistic either in terms of our ability to get there. It requires a lot of hard work.
Understood. We have a number of great questions. I know we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but one that I want to be certain to touch on is that the U.S. fleet's focus has been on highly sophisticated nuclear submarines, which take a very long time to construct and, as you've noted, have high maintenance requirements, whereas our adversaries are focusing on diesel electric, highly quiet submarines that can be produced in greater quantities and faster. Should we also be looking to diesel electric boats in addition to our nuclear attack boats we're currently producing? Is there a role there?
Good question. That comes up, came up cyclically throughout my entire career. Continues to come up, and I think it is something that we have to always look at. The real piece for me is the versatility and the capability that we have in our nuclear capable submarines. We're not just worried about the areas around our littorals. We have to be able to deploy and go under the ice. We have to be able to sustain ourselves for very long periods of operation, stealthily, and what have you. And when you go away from nuclear powered capabilities in submarines, you really lose a lot there in terms of that kind of resilience and endurance and stealth that we need. It all has to work together in that regard. And I just don't see how you do that with a diesel submarine fleet. And then if you mix and match, then you have even more of a juggernaut of sustainability of both sides. Now, the one piece I used to like was when we sort of rented that Norwegian submarine, the Gotland, I think it was called, some years ago, and we were able to use that in our training. I thought that was a very effective approach to being able to make sure we can not just work the synthetic part of our training, which we do very well in a very sophisticated way, but to also be able to have those kind of platforms. But then we are able to do that kind of thing when we deploy, when we work with our other partners and allies, interesting in things like Rim of the Pacific exercise, some of the things we do over in the European theater and what have you. Lots of opportunities to train against that kind of capability. But in order to do what we do, so many miles away from home, I just couldn't go there with the diesel submarine. So you may consider me a dinosaur, but having done those kind of operations, for long periods of time, you want to have that nuclear capability with you.
Understood. Admiral Haney, I know that you asked that we go through acknowledgements before you sign off, because we know you want to extend your own thanks along with the commissioning committee to the many outstanding organizations that have made possible the work of the Hyman G. Rickover Commissioning Committee. Before we do that, I want to mention that we've received so many questions. There's just time to get through today, but we will ask Admiral Haney to provide written responses to those questions, which we will then post to our website at ussrickover.org. And so with the Admiral here and on behalf of the Hyman G. Rickover Commissioning Committee, we would like to thank the leaders and members of the Naval Submarine League, the Navy League of the United States and its Illinois chapters, including the Aurora Council, the Chicago Council, the Glenview Council, and the Lake County Council, the Standard Club, as well as the Union League Club of Chicago, specifically Brian Williams, Debbie Lee, James Diligenzi, and Kathy Hurley, who've all made invaluable contributions to our work. Our friends at the United States Naval Institute, the USS Chicago 721 Club, the USS Illinois 786 Club, and the U.S. Submarine Veterans Incorporated. We're all grateful to have them sponsoring Admiral Haney's participation in the program. And now, given the subject matter we'll be moving into next, Admiral Haney, we want to thank you again and bid you safe farewell. Thank you for your contributions today.
Thank you, and thanks all those organizations for what they continue to do to support our submarine force and our Navy in general. Thank you.
It is now my privilege to introduce my friend and colleague, Stephen Schlegel, member of the Hyman G. Rickover Commissioning Committee and chair of its sponsorship subcommittee.
Thank you, Brian. I'll only take a couple of minutes. Thanks for everybody to attend. I'm not here to preach to the choir. I'm to thank you for your support and your attendance here today. If you weren't going to be supportive of the commissioning committee and the commissioning effort, you would not be on this meeting. I had a reaction to one of the things that Admiral Haney said early in his presentation, and that was how much his early experience in the maintenance end of things taught him so much about how things were made and how things were worked that he thought it was the most valuable education that he had received. Well, he used that education very well indeed to advance as far as he has and to be such a great leader. As a lifelong resident of Chicago and as a many-decade member of the Union League Club of Chicago, I was taken by the Chicago-based effort because of Admiral Rickover's youth in Chicago in a tough neighborhood on the west side. And it brought to mind the fact that the Union League Club has for 101 years served the youth of Chicago's toughest neighborhoods through its Union League Boys and Girls Clubs. And I'd like to simply note that there is currently a partnership between the Boys and Girls Clubs and the U.S. Navy in the sense that the kids, even at the elementary school level, are involved in submarine robotics manufacture, that is, making them themselves, and competition programs, which are supported by the folks up at Great Lakes Naval Base as well. There's the partnerships between the private side and the public side of the armed forces, and specifically efforts like this committee's efforts now can't be underestimated in terms of the effect upon the crew of the ship once it's commissioned, and the support of future crews that are going to follow the leads of those that came before them. If you have the wish to support the efforts of the commissioning committee, I can tell you that we need a lot of money. Other commissioning committees around the country and various ship commissionings have had to likewise raise a lot of money for the support of the commissioning ceremony, for the support of the crew and their families, for the support of the effort generally, just to keep the effort going, and supporting the operations from this day forward. To make a donation is very simple. You go to ussrickover.org and you'll see all kinds of sponsoring opportunities. You can do it online. If you are not one of those who make donations online and simply would like to write a check, you can make it payable to the USS Rickover Commissioning Committee. Send it addressed in a stamped envelope to the Union League Club of Chicago. That is to the committee at the Union League Club of Chicago, 65 West Jackson Boulevard, Chicago, Illinois, 60604. Thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for your future support of the committee and its efforts in support of the ship. Thanks much.
Thank you, Steve. And now in our next program, which will be coming up in May, we are greatly honored to welcome Admiral John Richardson, retired four-star admiral of the Navy, who had a most distinguished career as Chief of Naval Operations, Director of the Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program, Commander of all Naval Submarine Forces, Commander of the USS Honolulu, and Naval Aide to the President of the United States. Please keep your eye on your email inbox, which will have the date announced as well as the link for registration. We look forward to welcoming you back then. And on behalf of the USS Hyman G. Rickover Commissioning Committee, thank you for joining us today. It was a privilege to welcome you. Thank you and goodbye.